That was only sporadic because, unfortunately, when you have independent operations or any kind of a Green Beret civilian irregular defense group operation, the man who's going in to command it, like I did, had better understand human nature and how to get so that the people trust him. You know, Major Foy, I think that was the big thing. I had to pass the test, and I knew that, and I wanted it to be that way. I considered myself as the one that should be tested and not them. And they tested me, as I wrote in the book.
Yes, that first incident under fire.
That was something else.
That probably had to be quite harrowing, like, okay, I'm out here, when are you guys coming?
But you know, the funny thing that we did not learn in most places was that they'd been there fighting. Major Foy had been fighting for 18 years. And I'm going to go in there and wonder if he's brave. I'm going to wonder if his people can stand up against the enemy. I think perhaps the most important lesson that I learned, and I'm going to talk about it on the Syracuse radio station, is the importance of civic action in a counter-guerrilla situation. In Iraq, you don't know who the enemy is. In Vietnam, in any area that was handled like mine was, we had 64,000 WAHOs. We had 64,000 intelligence sources, because they knew from testing me and my men that we loved them and we respected them. So we were their friends, so they therefore became our friends. That makes a difference. When we would go out on an operation, we never worried about landmines on the roads. Because our people would have told us that somebody was messing around with the road. And we had an understanding between the Cambodian people and the Vietnamese Wahao people. Where there was 200, we had 200 Chams, 2 Malaysian Polynesian. They kept by themselves in one little area, and they obeyed the rules of the Wahaos around them, who did not interfere with their own religious beliefs or anything. But we had a rule that anything that moved at night was dead meat, you know, and we'd set out our ambushes before dark, and we'd pull them out after daylight, so that anything that moved, like I said, you could shoot at. So nobody moved at nighttime, and if anybody did, we'd be the first to know it. Somebody'd tell us. Either that or they'd be in front of us and we'd shoot them, one or the other. It was, but the people themselves were just, they were the most wonderful people of anybody I've ever met, the Wahao. 64,000 of them. When we went in there, and it's in the book, there was no doctors. You know, they treated the Wahaos, the government did, like we treated the blacks in this country. They couldn't go to medical school. So my 2 sergeants trained 12 midwives. We built 8 maternity houses. They go out every day except that 5 days when we had the fiercest battles. And they'd see between 100, 150, 200 people, men, women, and children, pull teeth. They didn't do any dental work except pulling teeth and handing out toothbrushes and explaining about dental hygiene, amputating, anything that a normal doctor would do. They had their little Merck manual with them, and that's what they're trained. They're trained in the dog lab. I don't know whether you ever heard about the dog lab.
I have, but I know, I'm sure that the people would want to know that it's...
Well, in the dog lab was part of the training of all Special Forces medics. It was a Fort Bragg in the old hospital area. It was completely off limits to anybody else. Dogs would be brought in, and they would be, their vocal cords would be cut, so they couldn't bark. They couldn't make any sound at all. And every Special Forces medic was assigned a dog. And he had to actually physically shoot that dog. And it's amazing because we call him Bác sĩ, which means doctor in Vietnamese. Sirois, who was with me, he said that was the saddest part of the whole thing, was having to shoot your own dog and then heal him. You know, take care of that wound. But then at the end of the course, they had to kill the dog because there was no more use. It was all done. It was a sad thing, but it taught them the essentials of how to operate on a human being by operating on a dog. Because, I mean, it would have been very difficult to have had a situation where they're assigned a human being and shot the human being, you know. So that's how they did it. That was the dog lab. So.
I do remember the story about you being presented with your
scarf?
Your purple scarf. Do you still have your scarf?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I imagine it's one of your most prized possessions.
It is. Major Foy Van Lee, after I passed the test up at Phu Hep, and going there with just my interpreter and having them all just leave the two of us up there. And I tell you who I was proudest of was that interpreter. He did not have to stay with me. I told him he didn't have to. But he's dead now. But he stuck with me. Ko was his name. And but once those Vietnamese saw that I was willing to go forward, I tell you, any time after that, if the enemy had tried to kill me, they would have had to shot me in the head, because they would surround me on all the operations. They would make sure that their Dai Wei, that's captain, wasn't killed. But let me see, where was I heading to from that? You asked me
the
something.
purple scarf.
Oh, the purple scarf. So he asked me if I'd like to go. Well, he didn't ask me if I'd like to. He says he wanted me to go to Wahao Village. Well, Wahao Village is where the Wahao Central Council met, and it's where Madam, trying to remember her name now, the mother of Win Fu So, who was the leader of the Wahaos, that's where she lived. And so he took me there. There's a picture in the book, and I met Madam, whatever her name is, I can't remember it now, the mother of the teacher of the Wahaos, and she presented me with a purple scarf. I was the only American ever presented with a purple scarf, and it was a matter of me being named an honorary Wahao. And at that time, I thought and I still do, I think it was the most wonderful thing that happened to me in combat.
Oh, yes, here's the picture right here.
Yep.
And
Win Fu So's mother.
Yeah, Madam
Bin, is it? Madam Bo Hin.
Yeah.
Right, Bo Hin. Thank you.
But that's an amazing story to be.
I wore that every day.
Yeah, and
she gave me two, a silk one for dress and a cotton one, which I wore in combat.
Which you then ended up with the nickname the Purple Pimpernel.
Oh yeah.
Your story about Lieutenant General Quang Van Dam in Vietnam, and then in Canada, is very amazing. Did you find that the way he was treated is a way a lot of the people, the Vietnamese army, were treated after we left and basically abandoned them?
Yes.
They were just thrown to the wolves.
As a matter of fact, I read a story, this was official documentation, backed it up, where the general officers and other officers of the Vietnamese army, when they brought them into, I think their first stop was in the Philippines, and they made them turn over their uniforms to them and would not let them keep any remnant of their uniform of the fact that they were in the Vietnamese army. And I mean, just refused it of them, which was a terrible way to treat them. General Quang Van Dang, when he, 2 weeks from the time that he saved our lives, as it talks about in the book, I believe it was Newsweek magazine came out with and they were co-located with the CIA personnel in Saigon, came out with some terrible stories to assassinate General Dang's character. He lost his job as a 4th Corps commander because of it. Premier Tew, who knew Dang and knew him real well since they were kids, then brought him right directly to Saigon, and he worked for